The noise of the helicopter faded into the grey sky above the Lobo complex. The rain fell lightly, but it hurt the skin, as if it were needles hitting the iron of the shacks. The narrow, dark alleys seemed to spy on every person who entered them. That place was the headquarters of the most dangerous faction in the state, the feared KO, and whoever stepped there knew death could come without warning. In the middle of that maze, under an old, rusty barrel, a man waited quietly. He didn't move. He looked and listened to everything around him attentively. They called him Mirage. Why? Because he disappeared in the middle of the chaos. No one ever caught him, not in a photo, not in real life. But Mirage wasn't a criminal, no. He was a skull, an infiltrator, a ghost of the elite squad, living in the midst of danger without anyone knowing. As Mirage walked through the wet alleys, finger on the trigger and silence cutting through the air, you already know. Stories like this don't appear on TV. And if you're here, it's because you want to know what no one has the courage to tell. So subscribe to the channel and stay until the end. 5 months ago, Rafael Montero, his real name, buried along with his identity, was thrown into the underworld for the riskiest mission of his career, to dismantle the drug trafficking, arms trafficking and corruption network that was corroding the city from within. There was no plan B, no backup. If he were discovered, torture would come before the shooting. And not even the troops would recover his body. The training was brutal. His accent, his habits, even his way of breathing were molded. Rafael was now Dogon, a recently released ex-convict with a criminal record and blood in his eyes. He gained the trust of Pesao, the gang leader's right-hand man, after planning a fake ambush against the police themselves. No one suspected that everything had been meticulously choreographed by him, from the first shot to the last siren. But time was running out. One of the KO soldiers, Magram, was starting to smell something wrong. He was paranoid, cruel, and had the nose of a war dog. He had already questioned Rafael twice, tested his story, looked for loopholes. One wrong word and it would all turn into a massacre, but Rafael was never wrong. He was the very lie made flesh. That night, the faction's most important shipment would arrive through a tunnel that only the bosses knew about. Weapons of war, Israeli rifles, grenade, launchers, imported vests. If they entered the favela, it would be the end of the line for any attempt at a police takeover in the coming years. Rafael needed to signal the troops, but the lines were compromised. One false move and he would be marked. In Rafael's mind, every step was calculated. He knew the rules of the game. At any moment his neck would be under the razor, but he also knew the skull does not back down. Skull finishes. And when the elite squad knocks on the door, there is no room for negotiation. Behind the scenes, Colonel Santiago watched the mission unfold, with his eyes swollen from insomnia. 2 intelligence men had disappeared before even crossing the first barrier of the favela. It was Mirage or no one. The city was hanging by a thread, and that thread, trembling with Rafael's held breath, was teetering between glory and the abyss. And it was at that moment when the radios began to crackle with disconnected noises and a scream echoed through the alleys. "Infiltrator, there are rats in the hill," that everything started to explode. Because now it wasn't just a mission anymore. It was survival. It was war. And Mirage. Mirage never failed. The lights on the hillside flickered as if the Complexo do Lobo itself had gone into convulsions. Motorcycle sirens roared in the distance, but Rafael knew none of them were police. They were the Hawks, KO criminals who specialized in hunting down traitors. The favela closed in like a living trap, and each step he took echoed like a warning. He didn't run. Mirage knew that running away would be an admission of guilt. Instead, he kept his expression cold, almost bored, as Bigfoot yelled over the radio, I want everyone on the 5th floor, now! He climbed the cement stairs with the calm of someone who knew every step, even though inside his heart was hammering in his chest. Sweat ran down his back, but he didn't shake. He had been through worse situations in training with real bullets, passing inches from his face. But here was different. Here any mistake was fatal. On top of the slab they were all there. Pezão, Magrão, Tucano, Leobala, and about 15 other criminals, all armed to the teeth. Magrão's eyes burned into Rafael as if they wanted to open his soul by force. Someone leaked the shipment route. The canyons are circling the north entrance, and there's only one mouth in this gulch that knows the whole route, the new one. Everyone looked at Rafael. Hey, Dogo, do you swear you don't know anything? Silence. Rafael took a step forward. He took off his cap, scratched the back of his neck and smiled. Me, bro? I've been here for 5 months getting my hands dirty for this shitty faction. I've killed, I've carried bodies, I've lost sleep. If I wanted to fuck you guys, Pezão, I would have done it when the cocaine shipment arrived, not now. This is a militia trap. These guys are trying to pit us against each other. He threw the cigarette on the ground and stepped firmly. He made direct eye contact with Bigfoot. But if you want to solve this with bullets, give me the rifle and let's see who's clean in this shit. The silence was so thick that you could hear the dripping of a leak behind the air conditioning. Pezão stared at Rafael for several seconds. Then he spat on the floor and slapped him on the shoulder. Relax, Magrão. Dogão is a kid. If he was a snitch, he would have died already. Rafael maintained his posture, but inside he knew that this was not an absolution. It was a warning. It was hanging by a thread, and Magrão wouldn't rest until he saw blood. That night he didn't sleep. The troops' radio had been silent for days. Protocol stated that in the event of a breakdown in communication, extraction would occur after 72 hours with or without confirmation. But Rafael knew that there would be no extraction if he didn't signal. And the only way to do that would be to activate the microtransmitter hidden in the false bottom of his sneaker, an action that required 8 seconds of concentration and 0 eyes nearby. But where, in that guarded hell, was anyone alone? He then came up with a plan. The next day, he spread the word among the drug traffickers that he had received a tip about a possible invasion by a rival group. He said he needed to check the tunnel through which the weapons would be coming. He sounded convincing, even too convincing. Pezão authorized it, but sent Magrão with him. Going down the sewers, the smell of rot mixed with nervousness. Rafael walked ahead, Magrão with the gun on his back. You talk nicely, big dog. But I know people who lied like that too. But in the end, we find out. We always find out. If I were you, I would worry more about the militiamen than about myself, Rafael replied without turning his face. They reached the blind spot in the tunnel. Rafael took a deep breath. He knew he only had a moment. He pretended to pee and bent down. Your bladder is weak, huh? Magrão grumbled. While pretending to ease up, Rafael pressed his heel against the hidden metal in his sneaker. 1, 2, 3. At the 6th second, the click sounded low, almost imperceptible. Signal sent. But as he stood up, he heard the metallic sound of a gun hammer being pulled. What did you do down there? Time has stopped. Magrão looked at Rafael's head, eyes wide, sweat running down his face. Answer me, you piece of shit. Rafael didn't think twice. In one swift move, he kicked Magrão's elbow, knocking the rifle away. The two fell to the rotten concrete floor, fighting like animals. Elbows, bites, knees. Magrão was bigger, but Rafael was technical, cold, precise. In seconds, he disarmed his enemy and strangled him with an old pipe from the tunnel. The body fell, dead. There was no turning back. Now everyone would know. The war would start sooner than expected. Raphael took the radio from Magron, still panting, and said just 3 words. "Start the storm." The troop listened, and when Skull hears the call, all hell breaks loose. The first light of dawn painted the sky red, as if the sun itself sensed the violence about to explode. The wolf complex woke up with a palpable tension in the air. Dogs barked incessantly, radios crackled with conflicting orders, and the KO soldiers were all armed, prowling the alleys with their eyes blazing. Magron hadn't come back, and Pezon knew what that meant. At the elite troop headquarters, on the outskirts of the city, the short transmission picked up by Raphael's microtransmitter was the trigger. "Start the storm." It was just 3 words, but there was the code. Mirage compromised, immediate extraction, total intervention. Colonel Santiago looked up from the monitor and gave the order with surgical coldness. "Code Skull, let's go up the hill." 3 Black Hawk helicopters took off from the base with military precision. Each Skull on board carried on its chest the symbol of victory over death, the knife in the skull, but also of the mission. Neither of them hesitated. They knew what was at stake. Mirage was one of their own, one of them, and no one left a skull behind. Down below, Raphael had already buried Magron's body at the bottom of the tunnel. He knew that he would gain very little time. He went back up through the alleys, meeting suspicious glances. Pezon called him aside. "Where's Magron?" Raphael locked eyes with him. "We had contact with an armed group. They caught him. I narrowly escaped. Did they catch Magron?" "Militia. That route was compromised. I said it was a hole." Pezon didn't answer. He just stared. Silence. Then he signaled for Raphael to leave. He obeyed, but he felt his time was numbered. At 6:47 a.m., the sky tore open. The sound of helicopters came in like a war cry. The propellers shook the clotheslines in the favela. The shacks trembled. And the first shot was fired by a boy from the faction, desperate, pointing to the sky. In response, Skull answered accurately. A dry snap, the boy fell. The war had begun. Raphael ran down the alley while the faction's radio exploded in despair. "It's the Skulls, damn it! Invasion! Everyone to the HQ! Where's Bigfoot?" He needed to get to the extraction point. It was the roof of Shack 17B, the last point on the southern corridor, but the path was full of crossfire. Every alley was a battlefield. AK rifles, homemade grenades, blood-stained vests. Raphael moved like a shadow among the rubble. He shot 2 KO thugs who tried to stop him. He didn't hesitate any longer. The invisible uniform weighed more than any disguise. It was Mirage, and Mirage never fails. A skull was advancing in the distance. He recognized the silhouette. It was Corporal Vinicius, his course partner. Their eyes met for half a second, and the discreet gesture was enough. Cover, advance, escape point cleared. But Pezon had not yet backed down. Raphael climbed the steps to the slab, blood streaming from his left, shoulder wounded by shrapnel. The troop helicopter was already hovering above, the ropes descending, but then a last scream came from the shadows. "Dogon, look here!" It was Pezon, rifle in hand, hatred in his eyes. "I knew it! I knew it!" Raphael turned around, panting. He looked at the man who had welcomed him, who had believed the lie, who had called him brother. "You lost, Bigfoot. Surrender. We never lose, we bleed, but we come back." Time stood still once more. 2 men, 2 worlds. A second of silence, and then shots. They both pulled the trigger. Raphael's was faster. Pezon fell, his blood mixing with the rain that was beginning to fall. From above, the pilot shouts, "Mirage, let's go!" Raphael tied himself to the rope. As he was lifted, he looked down. The wolf complex was burning with smoke, fire, bodies, but he knew this was just a part of the war. When he reached the helicopter, he fell to his knees. He took a deep breath. He trembled, not from fear, but because for the first time he was outside. "Mission accomplished," he murmured. And down there, among the rubble, the faction regrouped, because the world of crime does not die. He hides, it adapts. And Raphael knew. The next mirage was already being prepared. Operation Storm was officially declared complete at 7:12 a.m. 17 criminals were killed, 8 arrested, and an arsenal of war was seized. In the troop reports, the success was undeniable. But among the names, dates, and cold numbers on the paper, the name Mirage did not appear because it never existed. Rafael Montero was rescued alive, but part of him remained buried on that hill, along with his peace, his identity, and the faces of those who trusted him. The disguise had fallen, but the uniform, that one, would never be taken off. The mission was accomplished. The faction had suffered its biggest blow in years. But Raphael knew the war wasn't over. It had just changed its face. And in the silence of the barracks, lying on a hard bed, he just repeated in his mind, "Mission given is mission accomplished." So, would you have the courage to enter this hell and come out alive? Comment here what your strategy would be, and don't forget to like the video. New missions are coming, and you will embark on the mission too. See you next time.